Good morning, Chairman. We are now live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this formal meeting of the Public Protection and Communities Scrutiny Committee, my last as your chairman. I'm Councillor Andrew Key, chairman of the committee, and the vice chairman, Councillor Paul Skinner, is also in attendance. Can I remind you that this meeting is being broadcast live by the County Council's website, and with this in mind, I'd like to welcome members of the public who are watching us live. As the meeting is being streamed in the usual way, I'd also like to remind you that all your comments will remain accessible online and can be reported by the media. I'd like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There's no fire drill planned this morning, and in the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park and wait there, as we did before. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of the meeting, and also that the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman, and when invited to speak, you should press the button on your microphone unit to make it live, then press it again when you've finished. So we'll move on to the formal agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence and replacement councillors. Andrew, do we have any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillors William Gray, Alison Austin, Nigel Pepper. We also have apologies from exec councillors Stephen Rowe and Patricia Bradwell, and there are no replacements. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Item number 2, declarations of councillors' interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest? No. Thank you. Moving on then to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting of this committee held on the 21st of January 2025. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting held on that date as a correct record. The minutes can be found on pages 5 to 10 of the agenda pack. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Skinner, seconder, please. Councillor Danny. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Anybody against? I don't think so. Any abstentions? No. So item 4, announcements by the chairman, executive councillors and lead officers. Officers are reminded to take their reports as read by the committee members and are requested to summarise the key points from their report in about 5 minutes. Members are also reminded of the importance of succinct questions and contributions. And I'll say it for the last time, questions must be shorter than the answers. Just to make everyone aware, I may suggest that we have a 5-minute comfort break before item 7 today, depending on the time when we reach that item. So firstly, are there any executive councillor announcements? And I think Councillor Corey is online.
Yes, good morning, Chairman. No announcements from me, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Councillor Mrs Sue Woolley? No. And Councillor Daniel McNally? No. Any announcements from any of our senior officers present? No. And finally, exceptionally, just because it is the last meeting, I'm going to allow one of our members to speak. Mike.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Again, this is also my last meeting. As I'm not standing for re-election in May. But I would like to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to all the officers present. It has been a very interesting and rewarding period of my life, and this last 4 years as a councillor has been nothing short of exceptional. You have provided me with a vast amount of knowledge and also information and guidance. Again, I'd like to thank you personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Would anyone else like to add to that? I would. Oh, Councillor.
If the chance is here, yes, got to be taken. I think for me, this is one of the best committees I've ever been on. The collegiate working, the fact that we're all listened to, there's been a real sharing of thoughts, knowledge, and I've gained a great deal, and your chairmanship has been superb. And the quality of the officers that we have guiding us is spectacular. And I'm glad we've got this opportunity to say this at the start of the meeting, because most of you will be gone. I mean, the work that you put together, the papers, I mean, spectacular is the word. So I really would like to thank everybody involved. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And if I could just add a personal thanks, obviously, most of you won't be here at the end, and I was going to do it at the end, so thank you, Mike, for bringing it forward. Thank you all very much, but I would particularly like to pay tribute to Tracy, to Emily, and also to Andrew, who's stepping in today, because without their guidance, I'd make a right muck of it. So thank you so much to all their hard work. People who watch these meetings have no idea what goes on to bring them about. So thank you all very much. Anyway, that's enough of all that, I think, because we'll move on to the main item of business. And we're going to sit first today as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee under Section 19 of the Crime and Justice Act 2006 for item 5 on the agenda. Item 5 is the Lincolnshire Serious Violence Prevention Strategy 2025 to 28. This report is on pages 11 to 26 of the agenda pack and sets out an update regarding the application of the Serious Violence Duty 2022 in Lincolnshire, which falls under the governance of the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership. The actions required by the committee are to review and comment on the detail in this report, to endorse it and commit its support by raising awareness of the work of the SLP Serious Violence Core Priority Group, as it delivers its priorities in Lincolnshire to positively impact on our communities. And finally, item 3 is to request that a follow-up report be submitted in 12 months' time. The report is going to be presented by Lee St Quinton, Head of Partnerships and Operations, and Zoe Walters, Business Manager, Safer Lincolnshire Partnership. So over to you, Lee and Zoe. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you, Chairman. We are going to be... Yep. Good morning and thank you, Chairman. So we are going to be splitting the presentation between us, so thank you for the introduction. Just as a reminder, we did present last year and that gave the committee an introduction to the serious violence duty and also outlined our intentions to deliver that duty across Lincolnshire. What we are presenting this time is an updated strategy. We have a statutory duty to refresh our serious violence strategy on an annual basis. This has been embedded within the paper with various links for councillors to be looking through as well. And the strategy includes Lincolnshire's approach to preventing serious violence, our priority areas, our strategic aims, our key measures, and how we're going to use a whole system approach to deliver on that strategy. The current strategy is informed by a robust needs assessment, which includes the Lincolnshire Police's Serious Violence Needs Assessment, an analytical document which is a Vulnerable Localities Index that helps us to target our resources most effectively. We are taking on board the public voice. In the last paper, we highlighted that we had conducted a public survey, so those findings have been integrated into the strategy as well. And we also have the most recent Safer Lincolnshire Partnership full strategic needs assessment that we are utilising. All of the strategy has been supported by the responsible partners. This includes but isn't limited to the Youth Offending Service, Future for Me, Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue, Police, Districts and Integrated Care Board, to name but a few. In terms of data that we have included some high-level data within the report, just in terms of tracking the rates and levels of serious violence within our county at the moment. In terms of all serious violence, we can see that there is a slight increase for the year up until 2023-24. It is noted, however, that we only have partial figure for this financial year as we're not through it. What we are highlighting is that we do have a number of projects in progress to seek to continue to reduce the numbers of serious violence. The levels of youth violence is decreasing, and again, later within the report, we do highlight projects that we have ongoing, which my colleague here will make reference to. We have seen, unfortunately, an increase in homicide totals. However, what we can do is provide assurance that Lincolnshire Police have created a problem profile in relation to this, and that will assist with identifying information around factors of concern to address and elements that are contributing to the offence, such as victim-perpetrator relationships. Knife crime does seem to be decreasing, and again, we do have projects in place in relation to that, which we will provide further detail on. In 2025, we are looking at enhancing our data, so hopefully we'll be able to provide some more robust data for you. And finally, I have mentioned it within the report that we were unclear around financial arrangements for 2025 onwards. Since the writing of the report, we have had it announced that there will be funding from central government in a grant basis for 2025 up until March 2026. This is £358,000, and the process has commenced for project bids, which can include continuation of current projects if that is applicable. I'll hand over to you now, Lee.
Good morning, Chairman. I'm going to run you through a few of our projects. Clearly, we've got 18 projects currently in flight. I'm not going to go through all 18 for time reasons, but some of our key projects that we've got in play at the minute. The first one I'm going to talk about is the Happening. It's something we have discussed in this chamber previously, and a lot of members have been to that venue in Sleaford. This is a county-wide resource that looks at reducing specifically knife crime amongst young people and children. This has seen over 500 youth visitors to that centre, and that project is very well linked in with our youth offending services and Futures for Me colleagues in looking at trying to divert and support young people away from criminality and specifically knife crime. The second one I'm going to highlight on the report is around Operation Plotting. This is specific to the Boston area, and this is around their Community Ambassador Scheme. This launched quite recently, and we've been told that the project will continue under local funding through the Boston Town Board to the tune of around £250,000. So this is again compliant within our strategy around having those place-based approaches where the data tells us we need to do something a little bit more in certain areas. Operation Raptor, I'm going to highlight. This is a policing operation where we trialled a concept around using knife arches, predominantly within our nighttime economy, to remove knives from from the nighttime economy itself. This proved quite a success, where throughout the summer period of 2023 we reduced knife-enabled crime by 47%. That project has been rolled out further, and we now have 3 full setups of knife arches and wands that are used across schools, nighttime economy and community events. The Community Links project is another place-based specific project aimed at the Gainsborough community, and this is very much community-based, around 15 to 21 years of age people. This has strong links to public bodies but also private industry as well, and supports diversion but also opportunities within the Gainsborough area, which comes back as an area of deprivation within Lincolnshire. I'm going to mention very quickly around the Fire Cadets initiative that we're supporting with our colleagues from Fire. Again, specific to the Gainsborough area, that area of need within the county, where we support 13 to 17 years of age people to support them and divert them within those community-based projects. And finally, on page 24 of the report there, is a very new campaign, which is a safer knife campaign, which is known locally as the Pointless campaign. And this is looking at, and certainly in response to the homicide figures, which have increased sadly for Lincolnshire, and how 50% of those homicides are knife-enabled crimes, And the Safer Knife campaign looks at replacing people's knives in the home with rounded tipped blades, which there's a lot of academic study around this project with universities and how this can change the homicide profile for a county. So we funded a trial under that campaign, which Lincolnshire Police will work through. And that's the end of the report, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you very much. Do we have any speakers, please? Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. I was interested to read about fire cadets. I hadn't seen that subject before. And it says you started obviously in Gainsborough. Are there any other locations that we're doing this, and what success have you had in those areas?
Yeah, thank you. I'll take that. So yeah, we've got four locations across the county. It's a scheme. It's a national scheme. I'm quite privileged to be the National Fire Chief Council lead on fire cadets nationally. So it's quite embedded within Lincolnshire. The scheme's been running for a number of years. In total, there's around about 3,000 fire cadets across the UK. And this is ranging from, as it mentioned, between the ranges of 13 and 17, with quite an embedded programme that follows alongside and mirrors a lot of our own training programmes within fire and rescue, really with the aim to ensure that we're bringing young people together to give them skills and to develop them through particularly coming up to the period of that transition into adulthood. And there's areas within the scheme where we can give them qualifications and accreditations that can help them as they're moving forward, either into further education or into further employment. We've seen some really successes within Lincolnshire. We've seen some of our fire cadets that have transitioned into the fire and rescue service, which is ultimately our ambition, because there's a rich talent of a recruitment pool of people within there that are really displaying some fantastic skills and attributes that are really community centred. So it's a real success story, and I'm really grateful for the work that we've been doing with our partners to increase the funding to ensure that we've got cadets in probably some of these much needed areas like Gainsborough, where young people have something there they can go on a weekly basis, where they can meet their like-minded peers, but they've also got really positive role models within the fire service that really has, from the parents that have been speaking to us directly, have just seen some transformation in some of the behaviours of some of our young people.
Thank you for that information. It sounds though it's a good success. Again, I know I'm not going to be around next year, but whether there could be a small report on the success or the numbers, because I didn't realise there was that many, and it's maybe that comms could maybe get involved and broadcast the schemes and the success that they bring, because obviously we're trying to nurture young people and progress them, keep them away from crime. From personal experience, I've got a granddaughter that's doing police cadets, and she's having a real time, really enjoying herself and having all sorts of experiences through that. And I wondered, I know we're not directly involved, as it were, with the police, but we are as in one context on safeguarding side. Could that also be highlighted or promoted? Thank you.
So, just in regards to the report, absolutely more than happy to bring the report on the cadets. I think it's a great opportunity to showcase the work that the young people are doing and how we're supporting them, and also just to probably give you assurance, we are linking in with the police cadets and also RAF cadets, particularly because that's quite strong within our county of Lincolnshire as well, because that gives the our young people an even wider exposure to their peers as well. So we are looking at, but more than happy to bring an update paper.
Thank you, Mark. We've got lots of questions, so I've got some as well. I'll put mine in between now, so you'll have them all at the end. Can I just ask about project number 4, which is the happening, which I've got a real interest in. It's fantastic. I've been to look round. It's just up the road from me. Do we have any update on the funding situation for the happening? Thank you.
Certainly. So the happening will continue. Is the main statement there. The funding, we hope from the CPG will be funded from the £358,000 we just had granted to the county. We did have some temporary funding in place through the PCC's office and LCC Community Safety if that announcement didn't come from central government. So we realised the importance of that project for the county and the impact that it does have. Short-term funding in place, but long-term funding now available, and I'm sure our CPG colleagues will grant that.
Just remind us what you said, CPG, just to people that don't know what the initials mean.
Sure, it's the so it's a serious violence core priority group. So that is a group of professionals from many different agencies and organisations, including voluntary sectors, district councils, who all come together to discharge their duty under the serious violence duty of 22, where we've all got to work together to reduce serious violence.
Well, it is fantastic. I'm so pleased to hear that. I went through the programme myself, and it's fantastic. And I bet the kids love it as well. It's really done in such a good way and such a serious message. Great. So the next speaker is Jackie.
Thank you very much. This is very, very interesting. There's so much here I didn't know, actually, before seeing this. Could I ask a quick question about point number 6, please, where you talk about a visible change to the environment? We know that the environment is important, but, could you just give a little bit more detail in what you do, what you change, and what you enhance? Thank you.
Certainly, this is item number 6 there is around a piece of work that Chief Inspector Colin Clarkson did with the Boston Town Council around using offenders within the community to actually enhance the area. To answer your question, there's lots of things done in the Boston town centre, and that was very much crime-based. So we looked at the crime statistics to look at exactly where the problems were happening, and it's really taking that wider place-based approach to make the area look better, to make it feel better. We look at different pieces of legislation we can use where we can stop people consuming alcohol within certain areas. And right down to little things like planting of new flowers within the public areas. So it's that kind of wider approach to improving an area for the community rather than just maybe an enforcement activity. It's much more broader, making the place feel better, look better, and generally what we find is when we put everything in place in one go, crime levels will come down, the community will feel safer, and that's what we're aiming to achieve.
Thank you, Jackie. Another one from me then now. On project number 7, Raptor, and the knife arches, you mentioned the nighttime economy where you use these. And might sound like a silly question. Are people forced to go through them? Or how do you actually... Because if people volunteer, if they've got a knife, obviously they're not going to volunteer. So how does it actually work? Thank you.
Sure. This is a really interesting one. What I will say is, I'll give you a bit of data if I may, just to start this one. The knife arches and wands and the initiative actually found no knives within the whole operation, which we see as a remarkable success. We work with, certainly when we deployed it in the Skegness coastal areas, which did have a knife crime problem, we worked very closely with the Pub Watch scheme and licensees and our police licensing department, and working with their consent, and that a condition of entry to notable nightclubs, public houses, was that they would go through the knife arch, which created that certainly a culture of safety within that nighttime economy. A key strand of that work was also to make sure it was publicised. So when we did this operation, it was put out there that we would do it regularly within the summer. It wasn't covert in any way, that wasn't the tactic, but what that did was meant that people knew that we would be out searching people, using that condition of entry with the licensees, that if you wanted to go into that nightclub, you may be subject to a search. If you didn't want to be part of that, then you don't go in the nightclub. The support from licensees was quite significant, but what I would say is it wasn't always the knife arch that detected knives, it was the cultural change within the nighttime economy that actually reduced knife crime offences. And like I've said, you know, it's a 47% reduction in knife crime within that summer period. So when we look at, did the project work? Did that, what was quite a relatively small investment, work? I'd say massively yes. It did work. It was about having the item. It was about publicising it and making sure people know that the nighttime economy is not a place to bring weapons.
Is it possible to encourage these venues to actually have a permanent knife arch? And are they expensive? You know, because that seems to me the obvious answer, to have one there all the time. Thank you.
So the knife arches we purchased were just short of £2,000 per unit, and we coupled them up with knife wands as well. So when people were activated, they were very intelligent. They're far more advanced nowadays than your normal kind of scanner, maybe an airport or anything like that. It will tell us exactly where there is an item. So if it's in a waistband, in a sock, it'll tell us exactly where the item may be. So they're quite advanced. Can we force licensees to have them? No, we do have various powers under the Licensing Act where we can work with licensees and we can put clauses on the licence providing it's proportionate and necessary, but it's got to be judged really by that evidence base of if we saw repeated knife offences within a certain venue, then that's the discussion we'd maybe have around that licence, but we've got to work within the Licensing Act quite strictly.
That's great, Lee. Thank you. Paul, next.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is Project One, the safe havens. Certainly pre-COVID, I know a lot of towns had safe havens. In fact, I've even been out with the street pastors here in Lincoln, and they were doing good work, taking away those simple weapons like glasses, which can soon be broken and, you know, cause havoc. Just wondered what sort of coverage we've got over the county with safe havens these days. Thank you. Sure.
So sadly, the Safe Haven project is actually a named project by St John Ambulance. We ran this project very much as a pilot. We evaluated it fully, and it was, again, incredibly successful, where during that bank holiday weekend, again, it was in Skegness where we piloted it, we saw 0 instances of serious violence, and that's generally around, you don't always need police officers to be walking the streets. It's generally a uniformed professional can have exactly the same impact that there is somebody you know, walking the streets present in that uniform capacity, and certainly St John Ambulance fulfilled that. Sadly, because the way St John Ambulance were set up, they were unable to continue working with us. They're based very much in Leicester for the county. They fulfil a lot of their obligations within the Leicester kind of city centres. So sadly, they couldn't continue that work with us. We did look for alternative providers as well, because the funding was present, but sadly we didn't find an alternative provider to give that same fantastic response around that medical provision, those walking patrols, whether it's picking up glass, whether it's giving out bottles of water at the end of the night, keeping people hydrated. It's that kind of wider care package that can be so effective. So you've mentioned street wardens, a fantastic team of street wardens in Lincoln that are street pastors, sorry, who are fantastic and seek their funding from various different sources. Sadly, we've tried getting that set up in different areas of Lincolnshire through different community groups, and it'd be fair to say there's been mixed success with that, because we need people to volunteer their time and put themselves out maybe at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday evening, which is a lot to ask of anybody, certainly in a voluntary capacity. So whilst we do try, it can be challenging to try and get that volunteer base in place.
Thank you. Who's next, Paul? Anton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question will be regarding the early preventions. However, I want to share something with you which has happened to me live. I think a few weeks ago, I was with my wife in Hull. We're taking a walk. It was a sunny day, nice day. And then it comes to my attention, 3 boys, less than 14 years old. One of them has a knife of this size. and then he started stabbing some oranges in the road, and everybody turned their face and just walk away. So I tried to do something because, to be honest with you, something could happen that day. So I will feel very guilty about that. So the first thing I did, I tried to call the police. Then I followed the 3 kids with my wife just to see where they are going. So if something happens or if I see a policeman, I can easily tell them that he's having a knife. But believe you me, for half an hour, I didn't see a policeman, no police on the road, nobody has shown up. And then I found out because it was a football game, all the powers went to the stadium. So the kids, they were just roaming the street, and I was hoping that nothing will happen that day. This is just one of my experiences, is preventing. And we can all prevent crime if we can. However, sometimes it's limited, I think, powers that we have. So the early preventions, and as all we know, and I think a month ago it was on TV, a young student, a pupil, was always telling her friends that she will stab her teacher. If you're aware, it was on the TV. And she was filmed in the classroom stabbing the floor with a knife. Then to prevent that crime from happening, they told her parents, especially her father, to check her every day before she goes to school. But I think that's not a prevention because she can collect a knife from someone else. So can you just give us in depth, how do you prevent and what's the measures taken to prevent these things, knowing that some of the kids, they come from the private home? So if you can give us some answer about that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Was that, sorry, did you say Hull where that incident happened? Yes, yeah, sure. I think if I just address that one first, clearly that's Humberside Police's area, so I've got to be very careful around what I respond about.
It's just as an experience. I'm talking about prevention, that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And clearly that response, if you as a member of the public called up and said this as a person in public here with a knife present, that response, I'm sure we can all agree, should have been somewhat more swifter. When people are spotted in public with weapons, including knives, there is quite a detailed risk assessment in any police force around what that policing response should be and whether that response should be an armed response or not, which can at times delay matters. Certainly having worked in Hull and from Hull originally, there is generally a very good footfall of officers within the city centre, including an armed response. Why that never happened, it's very difficult for me to comment, but certainly it should have been better. I think we could probably agree. So just to raise your second point there then around the prevention. So we certainly, as part of our core priority group, we have, I think, absolutely recognised within the new strategy the importance of early identification and early intervention. So this is not always about intervening when somebody has completed an offence and come out the other side of the criminal justice system. This is about making sure we know who is progressing towards criminality before criminality. That's reflected within the strategy. It's part of the work we do around what Lincolnshire Police do, and then share that data with colleagues within LCC, particularly Futures for Me, and how we can look to intervene within those children and offer that support and diversion. In addition to that, a lot of our projects and a lot of our objectives that we deliver under this strategy are things like The Happening, which is that immersive knife crime package. So when we identify people who are either involved in that type of criminality or maybe heading towards that, anybody can be referred to The Happening, and we can give that really immersive product to that individual to make them think about their actions, which I think is a much better approach to immerse them with, get that peer group involved as well, get those discussions going, rather than that kind of enforcement activity purely just from the police. I think we've got to think a lot wider nowadays around why people are thinking this, why people are carrying weapons, and making them think about the different options that exist. We also have a very positive education provision, which is funded through this strategy, but also funded through Community Safety and LCC around our Stay Safe partnership. And I know we had Catherine Smith talking a few months back around what the education teams do within the Stay Safe partnership there. So I think we do quite a lot of positive things to try and get ahead of that criminality, to try and make certainly young people think about their actions, think about their behaviours, and make the right choice.
Thank you. And obviously, Danny, with you being in Boston, for Boston schools to use the happening, it's literally just up the road at Sleaford. So, you know, people probably need to be made aware of that if you get any inquiries. It's so local to Boston. It's economical for them to get there in small groups. I think is it 8 at a time? I can't remember.
Yes, I think it is 8, but we can be quite flexible with our how we staff that resource, and we've got people trained up now, I believe, within kind of Futures for Me even, so we can be really flexible with how we service the needs of whichever school, community group, or just individual child.
Great, thank you. Well, I have another question then. This is on Project 16, this pointless campaign with the round-ended knives, which seems to me such a sensible idea. I can't imagine why nobody's come up with it before. Obviously, the police are going to be giving these out, but is there anything else we can do to sort of encourage everybody to have round-ended knives? I mean, I don't really know why they have a point on, really, because when you're using them, you don't use the end. Perhaps if you could say any more about that would be helpful.
Sure. So I'll start with, I don't know if anybody saw it, there was a programme, I think it was on the BBC, which was hosted by Idris Elba, the actor, around violence and knife crime. And what Idris talked about in that programme was exactly this. He talked about a few things. He talked about what we've got in Gainsborough going on around that community initiative to reduce violence, a SERVE programme. We have one of those in Gainsborough, and the positives of that. He also talked about the Safer Knife campaign. Now there is a lot of academic study around this. There's lots of testing that have gone on, and it's really on the back of acknowledging that when knives are used, it can have fatal consequences. And whilst we see new legislation and new initiatives around things like zombie knives that we've all seen, which can be, you know, truly horrific if used in that manner. The reality is what we see is a lot of serious violence and knife crime is done by the standard kitchen knife in a domestic setting, and that is sadly where we see our homicide increase. So we've looked at this, we've assessed this. It's recently been funded in the last round of bids. There will be some comms, there will be some media to encourage people to do this themselves. However, the work that we will be pushing for, certainly in the first phase of this, will be around working with our Lincolnshire Domestic Abuse Partnership and looking to identify the vulnerabilities within our communities around people who may be subject to that potential domestic homicide in the future, is trying to prevent those offences. We'll also be looking at the vulnerabilities in people who are committing certain offences, maybe outside of a domestic setting as well. So we'll be looking at how we prioritise which households receive that offer, which will be a funded offer. They won't have to pay for anything. It'll be funded through the core priority group. And we will look to evaluate that as soon as possible. We are working with the university who are certainly championing this scheme. There are only probably 2 or 3 counties that I'm aware of within the country that are sort of grasping this early, but I certainly think this is a really positive campaign. If we can fund it properly and identify the high risk addresses, then, you know, hopefully we will look to reduce those homicide rates.
I suppose in the old days when all the knives were made in Sheffield, it would have been easier to get to the manufacturers, but a lot of them are imported now. But maybe we need to start at the production of the knives in the first place, if there's no point in them having a point on.
There is that. I think a lot of the rounded edges, there's only certain manufacturers that, and certainly what we're about to purchase using this funding will be from Viners, quite a key brand. I'm sure other brands are available. But that, you know, quite a reputable company have certainly got on board with this initiative and started producing a bank of rounded edge knives that we can buy that are quite affordable as well. It's not expensive.
Great, thank you. Liz.
Thank you. I'm sure we've all been horrified and saddened by the horrific instances of knife crime in Bradford and Nottingham. Move a bit nearer, okay. I've only been here since 2013. I still don't know how to use this, so yeah, I say that every time. We've all been saddened by the horrific crimes, for example, in Bradford and Nottingham. But we're hearing a lot about the failings of the NHS, sadly, in their support or lack of for these people who carried out those dreadful crimes. I'd just like the reassurance that you're working closely with the NHS and those other agencies, you know, some kind of blanket approach, really. That was just what I was thinking. Thank you.
Certainly. So our serious violence core priority group is, what I will say first is I chair that group. And it really is a fantastic group of people who are genuinely bought in to reducing serious violence, not just because they have a duty to discharge. People are there for the right reasons. Within that group, we have statutory agencies that must be part of it, and a lot of that are there on a voluntary basis. So whether that's the voluntary sector, but we have colleagues there from the NHS, we have colleagues within there from the integrated care boards. So we look at the serious violence issue within the county very broadly. Yes, we highlight key traits like knife crime, like homicide, like youth violence, but certainly chairing that group, I'm quite confident we do have the right people around the table to make the difference within the county that we need to.
Thank you, Liz. Well, I've still got another question, and we've still got time to get it in, really. So can I just ask you about the Operation Plotting and the Community Ambassador? It says recruitment completed. This is item Project 5 in Boston. Could you tell me exactly what the Community Ambassador is going to do, and what sort of people are they? Thank you.
Certainly. So Operation Plotting is quite a broad. It's a broad operation. Firstly, which was kind of the brainchild of Colin Clarkson, the local inspector and then chief inspector in that area, who's I think it'd be fair to say incredibly passionate around Boston and improving the community down there. I can't tell you too much in detail around this post. It's not something that I'm personally that close to. But certainly what the whole plotting operation looks to do is improve the community feel, look broadly across the different aims and objectives of what needs to be achieved down there. So we talked already about maybe just things like improving the public areas, using people who are maybe paying back to the community in one way or the other. But from my understanding, the community ambassador role is really about trying to understand the cultural differences as well amongst there. So Lincolnshire Police have a community cohesion officer. That's been in place now for quite a number of years and has proved incredibly successful in being able to integrate within the different pockets and different communities that sit within the Boston area, understand their needs, understand the different cultures. That one of the biggest positives we got from that was the perception of policing and the perceptions of policing within different communities of areas like Boston is very varied, massively varied. So it was really important to us to understand why people may not wish to engage with policing or government agencies if they are part of different communities. So it works, is my understanding, in a very similar way to our community cohesion officer, to try and understand the differences, work with that community and try and improve certainly links to different agencies, policing organisations, councils, and try and make us kind of one community within that kind of Boston area.
Thank you. I will just let Paul come in because he's a Boston councillor, so he can speak for Boston far better than I can.
Thank you, Chairman. Just wondered how far the work went, because Colin was very, very good at analysing data, and he was going to actually bring in, last time I talked to him, the health data as well, because some of these, and housing, because obviously housing has a big influence on some of this as well. I don't know quite where it finished up, but obviously you could predict where the hotspots were going to be quite easily.
Yes, I can't fully answer your question, if I'm really honest with you. What I can say is you're absolutely right, Colin. Colin's data mindset around identifying where we need to put our resources and our efforts is just an incredible amount of detail Colin goes into. What I will say is Boston has been adopted as well as part of our hotspot policing initiative as well, which is again a separately funded initiative by the Home Office, where the county received £1 million to operate a hotspot policing initiative. Various areas were selected, which were again very much data driven, and Boston was certainly one of those. So the hotspot areas that were highlighted already within op plotting were adopted as part of the hotspot policing, which would have seen additional resources from police officers, from PCSOs, but also community ambassadors, different community wardens within the area, which I know are in place within Boston. And it's making sure people are in that kind of right place at the right time, in line with what that data is telling us.
Yeah, at one time we used to do quite a lot of diversionary activities as well, and engaging, as you've mentioned earlier this morning, actually engaging people and knowing the next one's coming up and trying to gently edge them away from trouble, basically.
And that data picture happens at county level now. So certainly for the last probably 6 to 8 months, we've taken a new approach where we're looking not so much at who is committing the offences, but this is about who is on the periphery and coming up to committing those offences. And that could be that they're linked to a crime, they may be suspect of that crime, they may just be in that periphery. But what we find is if we can get to people earlier, identify and flag those, and some of the data is quite startling, and then we look at sharing that data with partners within predominantly Futures for Me, who are have an incredible setup really around trying to support and divert young people away from criminality. We also use the Gainsborough Community Links project as well, a fantastic project in how we can then divert those people towards that team and make sure they're funneled in the right direction and not keep on that path towards criminal justice system.
Thank you. And I will just get in one more. I know we've overrun slightly, but I just think the crime and disorder part of this agenda, it needs to have full consideration. That's why we've got it first. It's so important. On the funding issues for these projects, you mentioned the happening, and there is some uncertainty, I think, on the funding. How many of the projects are at risk or not at risk, or because there's obviously 18 altogether? Thank you.
So it'd be fair to say currently none are at risk. We've opened up a new round of bidding against the £358,000 that we've subsequently received. There is different sources of funds, as you'll appreciate, from different areas where we can draw from. Certainly the ones we identified leading up to the end of the financial year, the sort of cliff edge funding that would drop off in the happening, and sorry, there was one more which I can't remember now, but there was 2 clear projects that were at significant risk. We worked with our partners, certainly within kind of community safety in the PCC's office, to make sure we had that funding in place for those cliff edge projects that were going to fall off. So we're quite happy with the funding we have, what we've got going on. We can keep projects going. We can look to invest in new things that we may need to do. The Gainsborough Community Links one is currently funded until September 25, but there will be a bid in to run that to March 26 to keep that going until that financial year. Sadly, the government have only funded us for the year. They've not, obviously we welcome funding to be over, shall we say, 3 or maybe even 5-year period, so we have that longevity to give that assurance to these projects. But certainly with what we have and the funding we have for that year, we're quite happy that we can maintain the current service provision that we're offering and invest in some new areas as we see fit.
I've set the cat among the pigeons now because everybody wants to speak again. Karen. And
Yeah, it's just a quick one because I'm aware, Martin, there's the underspend on the antisocial behaviour budget money from last year. Can that not be put, because it's antisocial behaviour, isn't it, really? Thank you.
Yeah, so the activity that we're doing with that, the LCC £1 million is exactly contributes to the serious violence hotspot areas, because there is a natural crossover between serious violence hotspots and social behaviours hotspots. So the activity that we're doing with our young people's cohort, which is very much a place-based activity around where those activities take place and where our kind of adult cohort place-based kind of does feed into the work. So it is a contribution to it, so it does sit alongside it.
Thank you. Anton, if you could just be brief, please. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman. All I want to say is very simple. It's just I can see more presence of the police in Boston. There is more presence, and there is two types of wardens, which is they're always in the town. So that makes an impact on the to change the mentality of certain members of different communities. So the diversity is there. They're understanding what's the purpose of that. So I think they're complying with it and they're learning. And I think you can see that there is a reduction of certain behaviors in town when you go to the town, which is, I think, a lot for that. And I thank the police of Lincolnshire. Thank you.
That's perfectly brief for you, Anton. Thank you.
If I may respond, Chairman, just I think what you see in this strategy from the previous one is very much that place-based mindset. So this isn't trying to deliver a strategy for everybody in Lincolnshire, sadly. What we're trying to do is look at the areas that need that additional support, whether it's hotspot policing, whether it's additional funding for wardens, whether it's additional policing, whatever that might be. But it's and that I think is the main change within this strategy over the previous one, is trying to use that data set to look at where we need to be, when we need to be, and what would be the best resource to maybe fund for that area, because it's not always policing. I think that certainly the wardens, what we've just heard, can be a really effective tool to that kind of community engagement and crime reduction.
Thank you. Well, that does now conclude the questions. So, Lee, thank you so much. We put you under a bit of pressure, but you can go and have a cup of coffee now. Thank you for your questions and comments, everyone. It does conclude discussion now. I propose that the committee endorses the report and we commit our support to raising awareness of the work of the SLP Serious Violence Core Priority Group, and that the committee receives a follow-up report in 12 months' time. And I did just pick up during the discussions that Mike asked for a follow-up on the fire service cadets, which Mark's will obviously include in. There will be a report on that. It could probably be included in this, couldn't it, in 12 months' time? Thank you very much. Could you raise your hand if you agree with all of that? Thank you. That's unanimous. So we've no abstentions and no objections. We're now going to revert to sitting as the Public Protection and Communities Scrutiny Committee for the remainder of the meeting and move on to item 6. Thank you both very much. So item 6 is the Lincoln Museum redevelopment project. You just have to bear with me as I read this out because there are some confidential pages. This report, which is on pages 27 to 46 of the agenda pack, is for pre-decision scrutiny prior to a decision by the leader of the council and the executive councillor for fire and rescue and cultural services, that decision between the 3rd and 7th of March 2025. The actions required by the committee are to consider the attached report and determine whether the committee supports the recommendation to the leader of the council and the executive councillor for fire and rescue and cultural services as set out in the report, and also to agree any additional comments to be passed on to the executive councillors in relation to this item. Now, this is the important bit. Just to remind the committee that appendices A to D to the executive councillor report on pages 41 to 45 are exempt. If the committee wishes to discuss these appendices, we'll need to vote to move into exempt session. So, can we please have questions and comments on the open report first? And if there are any questions or comments on appendices A to D to the Executive Councillor report, can we please leave them till after we've voted to going into exempt session? So, after that, the report is going to be presented by Charlotte Rooney, Business Transformation Officer, Culture, and we also have Will Mason, Head of Culture, and Dave Pennington, Head of Capital Projects and Professional Services, in attendance to help answer any questions. Finally, Charlotte, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So my name's Charlotte Rooney. I am Business Transformation Officer for Culture and am project managing this exciting redevelopment from the culture side. What I would start by is just providing a little bit of a background and a context to why we're here today. So Culture Services first identified the need for some significant reinvestment to re-energise and increase public engagement to Lincoln Museum. This was identified within the Heritage Business Case, which was put forward and presented to the Executive in 2019. With almost 300,000 visits across our heritage sites each year, it is so important that we revisit our culture offer across our sites. We need to create new ways to showcase our rich heritage, and we need to put Lincoln on the map and Lincolnshire. The Executive approved the business case on the 3rd of September 2019, and the recommendations that sat within it, resulting in Culture Services proceeding with the procurement of the museum redevelopment. So prior to this redevelopment, a lot of work has been going on in the background to try and ascertain the best route for this procurement. It's a very niche and specialist project, and we identified very early on that we needed to find a specialist contractor who had the necessary skills and expertise to be able to drive this project forward. We engaged with multiple contractors during 2022 and 2023, and this allowed us to fully explore all the opportunities available before we went out to tender. Working very closely with our colleagues in corporate property, we were able to finalise the scope before going through the corporate framework, and we utilised the dynamic purchasing system, otherwise referred to as the DPS, to appoint a specialist contractor for the design. This procurement route provided us with wider access to specialist contractors. The standard procurement route is predominantly construction-based. Predominantly, this project is very design-focused, so we really needed that niche expertise in this field. Through that, we did a two-phase evaluation, and then from that, we could be confident that the preferred contractor had the previous experience and design capabilities to fully transform Lincoln Museum for maximum impact for the visitor. In January 2024, we successfully appointed that preferred contractor for the design, and we have been working to get into a place where we are now extremely excited with the concept for this new development. So the objectives of this redevelopment, well, it's the first of its kind since it first opened in 2005, so that's 20 years. It's an incredibly exciting time, and it's a really good opportunity for us to look at everything that we've collected over the last 20 years, looking at how we can enhance our core offer, bringing more of what visitors love to Lincoln and Lincolnshire. This will provide us with opportunities to rotate our previously unseen collections, which we hope provides more reasons for people to visit more often, so there'll be opportunities to come back and see something new. We're looking to create greater flexibility, so we want to engage with our communities through opportunities to update our displays more frequently. We want to enhance our events and exhibitions programme, and ultimately we want to provide a diverse offer that appeals to everybody, any age, any interest. So we're looking to increase visits ultimately, and in turn this will bring visits to our other sites across our portfolio as well. So we have the Museum of Lincolnshire Life, Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, we've got the Usher Gallery, and we also have Lincoln Castle. So ultimately, whilst we're looking to drive visits to Lincoln Museum through this redevelopment, through our networking and through our portfolio, we expect that those visits will disperse and also go onto our other sites as well. We're also hoping to work through a sustainable redevelopment. So as well as redesigning and bringing new things to the museum, we're looking to repurpose as much infrastructure as we can. We want to achieve best value, and ultimately we want to ensure that what we create has the longevity for not only for us to rotate our collections and for us to update the design from time to time, but to make sure that it lasts at least the 20 years that this previous development has. So we're hoping to achieve that within this project. The scheme will also provide opportunities for additional income to the council through increased visits. We expect there to be subsequent secondary spend, and also increase in visits to the surrounding areas within Lincolnshire. We really want to put this area on the map, and we want to bring people to Lincoln, to the wider areas within Lincolnshire, because ultimately the stories that we showcase at Lincoln Museum are Lincolnshire focused. So the scope, which can be found on pages 33 and 34, include a full redevelopment of the main archaeology gallery. We're looking for a transformational design, which has been carefully developed between ourselves, corporate property, and the preferred contractor. As I mentioned, we're looking to repurpose infrastructure where we can. So we have lots of display cases that are still very much fit for purpose, and we're looking to reinvest back into those, tweak them where we need to, and bring them up to a specification where we can reuse them for another 15 to 20 years. We're looking to refresh all of our stories, including how they're displayed, how they're told, and with a brand new introduction of zones and brand new trails for visitors, we're hoping that we can really bring the museum to life and for visitors to fully immerse themselves into the rich history of Lincolnshire. As well as updating what we already have in the museum, brand new for the museum, we're looking to install a series of both hands-on and hyper-realistic digital interactives. We want to really bring Lincolnshire's rich history to life, and through immersive experiences and hands-on interactives, we hope that we can provide all visitors with a chance to interact with our displays and really take something away from their visit. So as well as the main archaeology gallery, we are also looking to create a multi-purpose exhibition space, which will be situated towards the entrance of the museum. This will provide a wealth of public engagement opportunities, including events, exhibitions. It can be an introductory space as people come into the museum for the first time, and it will also open up wider opportunities for hire, which again leads into our additional income stream, which we hope to generate as a result. So in terms of progress to date, we have been working successfully in collaboration with our colleagues in corporate property. They've been supporting with the contractual and construction elements of this project. So we've been able to utilise the skills from both culture and property to deliver this, what is a very specialist project. We've been working really hard to develop a design that meets all of our objectives previously mentioned. We've been out to the community through a series of digital engagement, and that was designed to gather the views of existing, new and future visitors to ascertain exactly what they want to see out of their visit to Lincoln Museum. We have integrated their responses into the conceptual design, and we will be going out to our LCC networks to share the conceptual design with them, just to ensure that their views have been counted and that we can cover all bases in terms of the engagement that we hope to reach. Our collections team have been working really hard since the museum closed on the 14th of October. We've almost decanted all of our collections from the main gallery, so it looks incredibly different to how it did previously. And they've been carefully preserving and preparing all of our artefacts for storage whilst that work is underway. Once the redevelopment is complete, the collections team then have the mammoth task of recanting everything back into their new place. As you can imagine, we've had 20 years of collecting since the museum first opened, so this is a fantastic opportunity for us to review not just what we have on display, but everything that we have that isn't on display, to enable us to really refresh those stories, bring in new angles, and just create a wealth of excitement across the gallery. So it's a really, really, really interesting time for culture. In terms of value for money, so we've been utilising, as I mentioned, our skill set across culture services. We've been able to produce what I feel is an incredible redesign. The technical expertise through the Building Cost Information Service, otherwise known as the BCIS, has confirmed that the redevelopment is significantly below median value for comparison of similar projects, representing excellent value for money. It's always really hard when you go out for a project such as this because it's so specialist, it's incredibly niche, no museum is the same, the number of artifacts, the number of displays, they're all so different. So for a technical expert to confirm that this is excellent value for money has really just given us that assurance that actually everything that we've designed to date is best value for money, and it's exactly within the objectives that we've set out to achieve. So in terms of the funding, the total funding for this scheme is 1.421 million and consists of the full redevelopment of Lincoln Museum, the main archaeology gallery, and the brand new multi-purpose exhibition space. So it's both of those spaces combined. Our next steps, so we will continue to work with colleagues in corporate property and the preferred contractor to finalise the technical design. We've been following the RIBA stages, which is the Royal Institute of British Architects, to go through each stage meticulously to make sure that at every end of the RIBA stage, we have absolute confidence that we can go into the next stage in the full knowledge of where we're at on cost, time and quality. So we've been able to review that very regularly with both corporate property and the contractor as well. Main works are expected to begin in July 2025, and we do expect construction completion to be planned for January 2026, after which as I mentioned previously, we then have the job of recanting everything back into the gallery and preparing for our reopening with what we expect to be a major exhibition in late spring to early summer 2026. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Charlotte. Do we have any speakers yet? Anton, but just before I bring Anton in, I just want to, I've come up with this idea at the weekend, and you'll hate me for it, and I haven't told you about it till now, because you'd probably talk me out of it. But I noticed, Charlotte, in your summary of the report, you use the words Lincolnshire focused, and that's what I think is the quandary with the name of the museum, because for us people who live out in the wilds, when we see the name Lincoln Museum, we assume, rightly or wrongly, that it's all about Lincoln. So I was thinking this would be the opportunity to rename the museum. That's why I didn't mention it to you before. And I was going to suggest it's called something like the Lincoln and County Museum or the Lincoln County Museum, simply because if we call it the Lincolnshire Museum, people might get mixed up with the Museum of Lincolnshire Life. But I really think for people who know nothing about cultural services in Lincoln, they would think wrongly that it's just about Lincoln. So I think this is the ideal opportunity to address that. I'm sorry to throw it in now, but I was thinking about it all weekend. Thank you. I thought Councillor Corey might want to come in. Shall we let her in first? Okay.
Yeah, probably best, because I'll just show off if I can't speak first. So, but I want to thank Nicole, Will, and the team, especially Charlotte. As you've heard, she's been leading on all that incredible hard work, and also to Dave in property, who's been to the museum many times for meetings. So as you've heard from Charlotte, there's been months and months, probably years of hard work, creativity, and flexibility that they've committed to this project, getting it to this stage, and it's been a source of genuine pride for me as the portfolio holder to support the team to get it to this state. And I look forward to hearing people's comments. And that's it. We've heard a lot from Charlotte, so I don't need to say any more. Maybe the team will have something to say on the opening comments from the chairman about the name. I'm sure they're chomping at the bit, so I'll let them carry on. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, I think I dodged a bullet there. I thought I was going to get into trouble. Okay, we'll come on to you for your comments about that. Thank you.
If I may, thank you. Actually, you've touched on something quite interesting, because when the first public museum opened in Lincoln, it was called the City and County Museum, for the exact reason that you're mentioning. It's a really important part of what we do in the museum, that it is in Lincoln, but it does tell the story of Lincolnshire as Charlotte describes, but also that it pinpoints, it spreads the word out, it talks about the stories of Lincolnshire, but also how you can find out more about those stories, how actually what's kind of exciting and local. We work really closely with our colleagues in the Historic Environment team, who have done some amazing work in the last couple of years looking at the towns and the histories. We're working with them at the moment on a concept of pop-up museums. So we had a really successful one 2 summers ago at Hull Beach. We're working on one now, hopefully for later this year, for Rugby. It's a bit of a trial that we're going to be able to spread out further and further and further. The last thing we want to do is hold the collections that tell the stories of Lincolnshire in Lincoln. We need to also enable where those stories can be told in their local areas, in the way that we work with Grantham, with Stamford. Conversation I had last week with the Lincoln Civic Trust about St Mary's Guildhall. The opportunities are endless. In terms of the name, I mean, we could debate it all day, and I would probably enjoy that, but I might be the only person that did. We did, of course, actually rename the museum last April. Yes, time flies by so quickly now, because it had a not the strongest name when we first opened it. It was a matter of much contention back in 2005, and it used to be called The Collection. But it did have the branding Art and Archaeology in Lincolnshire. And I think that's probably the important thing to remember, that if you just see the name, absolutely, is Lincoln Museum, so is it the Museum of Lincoln? Yeah, it tells the story of Lincoln, but it absolutely tells the story of the rest of the county as well. So it's how we market that and how we actually ensure when we're out there on social media, how our website works, how we connect between all of the different heritage offers across the county, that it reinforces, it adds to the critical mass of the amazing heritage that this county has. There is no period of history in which Lincolnshire's heritage isn't world class, and there is almost nowhere in what is a very large county where there isn't an incredible treasure that you can stumble on, a story, a building, a collection that tells that story, whether it's the Romans or the Vikings or the Saxons or the medieval, or, and I had to stop myself from chuckling when Charlotte mentioned the mammoth task that's coming up. That mammoth task will include putting mammoth teeth back into the museum as well. So it's quite literally a mammoth task in that respect as well. So it's a really good point about the name. It's something we're very conscious of, and we'll ensure that as we move forward and market the exciting reopening, that we make sure people realise that it is all of Lincolnshire we're telling the stories of.
I'll take that as a maybe then. Lincoln and County would be my suggestion. We'll put it in the notes, but obviously that's up to you. I'm so disappointed that Karen stepped out of the chamber for a minute, because she's obviously a Lincoln councillor. She normally gets in Ermine Library at these meetings, so this is my perfect opportunity to mention Heckington Windmill, because obviously for many of us, we're not Lincoln councillors, and our tourism is in our own areas as well, because we're obviously attracting people to the whole of the county. And that was the serious message behind my suggestion for the name. Right, so Anton, I think you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief again. The only thing what I want to say, thank you, Charlotte, for your report. It's very interesting, really. You know, reading about Lincoln sometimes, and I think a couple of weeks ago, was compared to Cambridge, with the heritage that we have in Lincoln and the Lincolnshire. Since I moved to Lincolnshire, I found out that the whole Lincolnshire probably, and the towns and small villages, they're for me as a museum, because you found old buildings, you found a lot of, you know, things, which is very interesting. The only thing which is I'm interested in, and I think it's a very valid point, it's our, it's our transport links. They're very poor. And if I give you an example, if we take a family of 4 who would like to visit the museum on Saturday or Sunday, and they would like to come from Boston, they haven't got a car, they have to take the train, then they have to take the train to Sleaford, and sometimes Sleaford, the trains are not adequate, the timing is not there, so it may take them a long time. So I think the transport, it's a very crucial point that we have to work on and make it easy for the families and people from all around Lincolnshire to come in. Suppose, another example, I will come and visit probably Stamford, and then I will find out that I can visit Lincoln. Then I have to think, how can I do that? So if we work on the transport, I think we can increase the footfall, because you talk about 300,000 people visited last year. So we can increase that. And like I said, the transport around Lincolnshire, I found it myself, is very poor, especially for families who doesn't have cars.
Yeah, thank you, Anton. Obviously, that's probably beyond your remit, but if you want to comment, that's fine.
I can take that one, because fortunately transport also sits in my portfolio, so I have culture and buses. I absolutely hear what you're saying. In Lincolnshire, we were really fortunate that we were awarded quite a large sum of money from the Department for Transport, called the Bus Service Improvement Grant, and that was deliberately designed for those minority and periphery areas who don't get served well by public transport, and so the public transport team and the network design team are working to recreate either routes that have been lost over time, or indeed around new developments. And I know Boston to Lincoln, Spalding to Lincoln are key route areas that we are focusing on. So I will ensure that the transport team respond to you directly with what the new information is and what the new plans are going to be.
Paul's going to be next.
Thank you, Chairman. It's quite an opportune time to ask this question, because we've got actually an energy conference today that we're running, and we could have gone there instead of here, but this is a lot more important. Chairman, what I'm going to ask about, while refurbishing, are there any opportunities to use more eco-friendly ways of heating, etc., and use green energy in the museum? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so obviously I've already mentioned about the sustainability approach to this project, so we're repurposing as much as we can. We've been very fortunate that actually we've been able to receive a sum of money from the Sustainability Development Fund within the council, which will see us completely replace our lighting structure across Lincoln Museum from one of halogen to LED. That will significantly reduce the energy costs. It will also improve the lighting. I don't know when you last went to the museum. It's a very old system. We've got old halogen lights. Lots of them no longer work, or they're not there at their brightest. So not only will this this pot of money improve the energy efficiency of the museum as a whole, but it will also vastly improve the visitor experience. What we've been able to do with that sum of money is not only improve the lighting in the main gallery, but also across key areas of the museum. So we have our temporary gallery, our courtyard gallery, and the new multi-purpose exhibition space. So all of those areas are going to be completely refreshed with brand new lighting. We're also looking to install a Bluetooth system, so the lights won't be on for any longer than necessary. So yes, in answer to your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike's coming next, but I forgot to mention earlier when I was going on about the name, there is a typing mistake in the report on page 30 where it does actually refer to it as the Lincolnshire Museum. So I meant to say that earlier. Anyway, Mike, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, interesting read, and glad to see that we're progressing with it and coming up with some novel ideas on presentation. There's a terminology, dynamic purchasing system. I haven't come across that before. Could you give us a bit of a background on that one, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so this may be a question that Dave Pennington will be able to answer in greater detail than I. It is a framework from which we were able to draw the expertise of very niche contractors through a framework that allows us to go through standard tender processes, but it allows us to reach a much wider market. So whereas traditional tendering, we would have certain contractors already on the system, this one produced a far wider breadth of contractors with very specialist areas, which was the reason we chose that DPS. Dave, I don't know if there's something else you wanted to add to that. Thank you.
No, thank you, Charlotte. I think you summarised it well, actually. But yes, it just allows us to get in contact and contract with specialist contractors. It's an option under a legally compliant framework that we are allowed to use.
Thank you for that. Another question, if I may. Seeing one or two of the pictures, the presentations showing how
Mike, they may be in the exempt pack.
Sorry?
Those may be in the exempt papers.
It's not a financial question, it's a design question.
Yeah, it could. I think I'll just check with the officers.
Okay.
Was that that's you done? Okay, Liz.
Thank you. Actually, we've covered a little bit of this because of what Paul asked about lighting, but I've been to the museum many times, and I have to say I've always been disappointed. I'm really sorry to say that, because it's terribly dark and it's terribly sparse. And I'm really sad when I hear, and I know it's the same as Askerby Hall in Spalding, which I'm very involved with, that there's so much stuff put away that's never seen. And I think it's really important that this time we make sure there's more about and that we change it more often. I mean, it's simple enough, but equally I know it's a lot of work for people, but I think that will draw people back as much as anything. But I went to an art exhibition and it was so dark I had to make a complaint. And I understand light damage, etc., but equally I think you've got to have enough lighting. So that really is my point. Getting more stuff out, I think, is vital. And yeah, I don't want to go into anything that we shouldn't be talking about, because I think lighting is a really important point. So I won't say any more at the moment, but thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor. No, you're absolutely right. Lighting is really important. We completely appreciate the difference that good lighting makes. We actually recently reinvested into the Usher Gallery, and we've improved the lighting there, and we've had significant positive feedback. So we know the positive impact that brings, which is exactly why we really made use of this funding to not just include the main gallery, but also to highlight all of the areas across the museum that we know would benefit from that additional lighting. So we're going to use that fully to create the biggest impact for our visitors. Equally, just in response to your comment with regards to displaying more collections, that's absolutely what we're trying to achieve. So rotating those collections, you're right, it is a challenge. Some of our display cases are designed to be very tricky to get into, but it does mean that in this new design we've been able to build that in to allow us to rotate those collections more frequently. There really is so much that we want to show the county and the community, and with this new design we will absolutely be able to achieve that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. If you want to ask your question in open session, thank you.
Oh yes, it's actually a comment rather. I do agree with Councillor Sneath about the lighting, and I'm glad that you've dealt with that. I have to say, I think this is a hugely imaginative project, and I'm so glad you're doing it, because you're laying it down for the future, for future generations. And I mean, it's a museum, and I still call it the collection. I'm really sorry. It's my favourite place, simply because I absolutely love those Roman soldiers. Please don't get rid of the case with Roman soldiers in. Keep them. I like the variety of the place, even in its old state. When you consider the Battles and Dynasties exhibition, I don't know how many times I went to that. It was breathtaking. Where in the country would you have all those documents together? Where? Lincoln. And I do congratulate you on the imaginative way you're going forward, and I look forward to going again when it's done. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Just before we close the open questions, when I visited, and I did mention this at the time, I tried to park in the car park just past the museum. I think it's a city council car park, and if you get in and it's full, you can't get out without backing. And everybody I saw after I'd had trouble was having the same issue, that you can't drive in and drive out, and it was really awkward. And I think if that was people's first impression of visiting the museum, it wouldn't be a very good one. And I just wondered if there's any chance of getting the exit reopened. I think it looks like it used to be open at one time, but it would make it so much less stressful if people were trying to get in there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm very happy to actually share that with the parking officer and the director that covers that in the City Council. You're absolutely right. That car park itself is incredibly popular, very, very busy. The investment the City Council put into the transport hub recently has made a massive improvement, and we're really keen to ensure that people can move around the city. So if they park somewhere else, if they're visiting more than one attraction, if they're there to shop, eat, and visit attractions. There's been a lot of investment in the city centre signage as well to ensure that people can move around. It's not the best car park, that one. It's quite small. There's been talk for years about changing the space behind it, but I'll certainly be very happy to share those comments with the City Council.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions for the open session then? In view of what Mike has said then, just bear with me a moment. We now move on to the exempt appendices A to D to the Executive Council report on pages 41 to 45. So just to be clear, could you please indicate if you wish to speak on those appendices? Thank you. So I propose then the following motion, and you'll have to bear with me while I read it out, that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for appendices A to D of agenda item 6 on the ground that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of the schedule 12A of the Act. Do I have a seconder? Paul, all those in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Anybody against? No abstentions. Thank you. That's agreed. Then for any members of the press and public watching, we will now be back. We'll be back in open session and streaming live again before the committee takes a vote on this item. And we'll pause now while the live stream is switched off. So we are now back in open session and streaming live again. So thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. Our comments from today's discussion have been recorded by Tracy Johnson, Senior Scrutiny Officer, for passing on to the Executive Councillors. And I propose that the committee supports the recommendation to the Executive Councillors and that we agree to pass on our comments. Could I have a seconder, please? Mike, all those in favour? I think that's everyone. Anybody against? Any abstentions? So no, thank you. That item is carried. And I think Lindsay wanted to come back before we have the break.
Yes, thank you very much. I have to, sorry I couldn't be with you in person for this last meeting, but I have to go now for another meeting. But I wanted to thank you, Andrew, for your excellent chairmanship of this committee, and to Nigel, who was in the chair before you. And I also want to thank members of the committee for your challenge and support over the past 4 years as we seek to deliver public services that meet and excel our community needs and to continue to improve. It's been fun and rewarding to be your executive member for Fire and Rescue Emergency Plan, Business Continuity and Culture. And this has been possible because of our excellent officer teams, those who support us through policy development, through committee stages and decision making, and those officers that deliver these services on the front line. So I wish everybody well, whatever life throws at you after May the 1st, and hopefully see you on the other side. Thank you, everyone.
Lovely, thank you, Lindsay. Well, I think I am going to now have a 5-minute comfort break, and we will restart, well, about 7 minutes to. So if we could, sorry, we're going to have to pause the live stream again, Andrew. Sorry. Welcome back, everyone. We now move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the service level performance reporting against the success framework 2024 to 25, quarter 3, found on pages 47 to 74 of the agenda pack, and reflects on the performance achieved in quarter 3 relevant to community safety, coroners and registrations, trading standards, fire safety, libraries and heritage, road safety and volunteers. The actions required by us are to review and comment on the service level performance, and instead of inviting officers to present their section of the report, I'll take it as read and invite members of the committee to ask questions on each section in return. We have a number of different officers in attendance to help answer our questions. So, first of all, community safety, page 48. Any questions on community safety, please? Well, I'll ask the first one. On page, well, it mentions within quarter 3, only 10 new call blockers were installed, which seems low. What's the average number installed in each quarter, and what more could be done to increase this number?
Thanks, Chairman. So, yeah, thank you for checking the data. It is actually inaccurate. It should have been 15, and 15 is the average that we do deploy per quarter. Based on last year's figures, which was a total of 61 last year, and obviously we've got more than that this year because we've got live 80. Call blockers are offered to every single victim that is visited in terms of where they have a telephone-enabled fraud, and it's a voluntary kind of selection for them to do it, so not everybody takes it up, but there are kind of probably 5 key things that individuals can do in terms of their own protection, because there are other elements that you can do. So just to be sort of really clear on that messaging is that in terms of protecting yourself from that telephone fraud, first and foremost, always be sceptical of unsolicited calls. You know, always think about what the purpose of them are for. There's obviously the use of call blockers, very, very effective way for blocking those unsolicited calls. There's also that you can register free with the telephone preference service. So this is something that telephone providers all offer in terms of removing those unsolicited calls. So it's not only a call blocker that does it, but there's a free service out there that companies kind of utilise. Never share those personal informations. Really would be useful for members of the public to educate themselves about the tactics of telephone-enabled fraud, and the Police and Crime Commissioner, in conjunction with our fraud team here in LCC, have produced a pack for members to use, so that's online and people can get hold of that. And then if there are any suspicious calls that people receive, then by all means please report that to Action Fraud to give us that really rich intelligence picture of what is occurring and where it's occurring. So our figures in the paper were wrong, so thank you for that. So 15 is our average, but whilst it seems small, there are lots of other tactics that take place, and it is a voluntary element of them selecting it. So far we've got 80 live, 15 this quarter.
Thank you, Martin. We'll move on then to coroners and registration, pages 49 to 50. Any questions, please? Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. It's on page 50. It's regarding about cases that are still open cases. I know we've only got 24, but that's still 24 families affected. And I'm wondering, hopefully during the rest of this year, that number can drop even more. Could anybody give us an indication on possible reasons why these cases should still linger on past 12 months?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. These are cases that are can be or are involved in the criminal justice process or a road traffic collision investigation process. So those where there is an external investigation going on outside of the coronial process or in line with the coronial process, that ultimately delays their ability until those initial investigations are concluded. The coronial process can't take place.
Martin, I'm going to ask you something that I ask you every time. You know what's coming. We've got the births register target. I'm going to ask you about the death registrations, which aren't on here. I was talking to a funeral director again yesterday. I work in the funeral service. And they're still very concerned about the delays with the new registration, death registration system and getting the certificate. it does seem to be causing more delays. I've noticed with families I deal with, they seem to be getting worse again with this delay, and it's holding up funerals. Is there any glimmer of light with this?
So you are right, and I think there was always going to be pressures coming over winter, because we'll always naturally see this is the you know, unfortunately the kind of busiest period in terms of death registration. So that was going to put extra pressure on the MEs in terms of that registration process. So we continue to inform and have conversations with our health colleagues, who, you know, it's a health issue. It's not the registration issue. So if pre ME contracts, we had 5 days to register the deaths and get appointments for deaths so they could move through the system. Lincolnshire were at 31% compliance of that as a result of the referrals being late coming into us. Our 5 day process now is that year to date we're at 87% registered within 5 days. So once they do get through the ME process, we can actually get them processed through to registration very, very quickly, and then moved on to the funeral process post that. The challenge is the community deaths. It's the community deaths that are currently causing the most delay, and that's generally sitting with GPs. But all I can say is we continue to kind of put forward the data and the delays about who, when, how, what, why is this being delayed, and then highlight that back into the ME process that's overseen by health partners. And we also use our exec councillor, Councillor Woolley, in terms of the public health element to also make sure that those conversations are being had as well.
Thank you. And obviously, for those who don't know, ME is medical examiner, isn't it? I would like some note to be made for Councillor Woolley that this is still a problem. It's not a registration service problem, as you say. It's before it gets to you. But really, we do need to be continuing that pressure, because I know families have been distressed recently with not being able to arrange their funeral, or wondering if the process is going to be completed in time for the funeral to go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think I certainly continue to have those conversations with her, and also brief Derek Ward on it as well, in terms of that public health aspect. And the reason that we didn't have death registrations in this performance pack was as a result of this year knowing that the medical examiner process was going to come in, but also that our figures of compliance of our 5 days weren't in the hands of the registration service, where now they totally are. So next year we can look to put the actual death registrations in, because it's actually measuring the registration service compliance rates of the 5 days, as opposed to GPs or other medical practitioners to kind of get us the data.
The original 5 day rule was from date of death, wasn't it? This is now from the date that you get the paperwork, is that right?
That's absolutely correct, yeah.
And that was going to be my second part of my question, why isn't it on here, but you've answered that now. Thank you. Any more questions on that? Okay, so we'll move on to trading standards, pages 51 to 52. Just bear in mind, this is also an agenda item in a minute. Mike.
Thank you. It's regarding the success that you've had regarding the confiscation of illicit tobacco. And my thoughts were on this. Do we do enough promotion to the public to warn them off that some of these illegal tobacco's sales, that the standard that the tobacco's at might actually harm their health more than the normal nicotine because of whatever else might have been thrown in the mix? Thank you.
Mark, are you coming in on that?
Yeah, there are some guidelines on what we can and can't say about illicit tobacco. These are nationally recognised guidelines. In terms of we're talking about smoking, all smoking is bad for you. And there's not enough research been done, certainly locally, on the content of illicit tobacco to say whether it is any better or any worse than normal smoking. So we don't promote it in that manner. But there's currently just launched, again in conjunction with Lincolnshire Police, Opnavida, and you'll start to see a lot of promotion around the work that we do to tackle illicit tobacco. There's quite a bit that went onto social media last week around the hides and the locations that we found illicit tobacco. All of those videos were actually from Trading Standards Officers body-worn video cameras. So it is something that we're aware of. It is something that we're looking to actively tackle and to promote because we really want the public to report it more to us to improve that intelligence picture.
Thank you. I did notice we had a chat a bit ago about communicating some of this illicit tobacco seizing, and it's been all over social media. It's been coming up on mine constantly, so that's really good to see, just to see the successes that you're having in such a difficult job.
Yeah, it worked really nicely because we put the press release out for our work and then this particular report at the beginning of last week, but there were operations ongoing last week as well. And the police have put further press out and launched Open the Vida at the same time. So it's sort of flooded the marketplace, I think.
Oh, that's brilliant. Paul, I think you want to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm going to pick up on the unsafe goods. I mean, obviously, we've just had the growth time of year when loads of counterfeit toys and perfumes and stuff. How much of a problem is it in Lincolnshire for electrical goods and stuff like that that obviously don't conform to CE markings, etc.? Is it a major problem?
Again, it's if you look at reports that are put out by the Electrical Safety Council, by which through their test purchasing activities, then particularly online sales are a concern. Very little checking of what's being imported. Some fulfillment type places where you appear to be ordering from somebody who is based in the UK, but actually the order's being fulfilled by being sent from a third country. There are particular problems with electrical products, and they find a relatively high safety rate. We have done some testing in the past, particularly around retail, and it's generally been pretty good on the retail. We do find the odd problem, but it's usually around labelling and warnings and things like that. But we do keep it under monitoring, and it's something that we repeat on a periodic basis.
Thank you, Mark. Let's move on then to fire safety, pages 52 to 63. Fire safety. If I just start, and then Jackie, were you just putting your hand up? Yes. Oh, will you come after me then? I've got it in my mind what I'm going to say. The average response to dwelling fires, Mark. I noticed it says the average time it takes for crews to turn out to incidents has increased, which is obviously, on first sight, you'd be a bit concerned about. Would you like to just explain that and to say perhaps why that's happened?
Yeah, thank you. I'll give a bit of an overview, and Ryan probably might be able to give a bit more details. But a lot of this links down to our continuing challenge with availability and recruitment. So in regards to our on-call stations, we, as you know, we generally historically look at trying to recruit within a 5-minute curtilage of the station to bring them in. We're finding that more of a challenge. So the less people we have on the stations, then that time for when they are available does decrease, and the travel time for them getting into the station, we sometimes may have to extend that beyond the 5 minutes to keep an appliance on the run. It is one of our biggest challenges at the moment is in regards to the availability of our on-call, and that just has a knock-on impact in regards to our response delivery model. We manage it the best we can, and we are seeing an incremental increase in those response times because of it. But fundamentally, the crux of the issue is that we do need to try to improve our recruitment and our retention for our on-call with the current models that we've got. Ryan, did you want to answer anything more?
Thank you. Just on the on-call, I know you try your best to recruit people, but what more can we do to encourage female firefighters to go on call? It's such a hard thing to do, I know, but what are we doing in that regard?
So we've launched quite a few positive action initiatives. We put on several Have a Go days, and we target them at females across the county as well. we do quite a few social media campaigns, trying to get out into communities, really trying to do this myth busting about the stereotypical view of what a firefighter should look like and who they should be, because it's absolutely it's a role for everybody. And we welcome, and we would really we need a better representation for our firefighters within Lincolnshire. So yeah, we have got a targeted campaign in regards to positive action to try and trying to educate people really to really understand what the role of a firefighter is, and absolutely it is for everybody.
Are you attending the agricultural shows this year? Because obviously that would be a good opportunity to do that message.
Yeah, I haven't got a list of the of all the shows that we are attending per se, but we do link in closely with the National Farmers Union as well in a lot of our work. So and we always take the opportunity to push our recruitment campaigns with them.
Jackie's next. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Mine is about targets, actually. I've chosen a random target on page 57 and to see how you're presenting the targets, because I do feel that officers shoot themselves in the foot a little bit. So you've got this target for building regs. Yes, it's the one on building regs about attending. So you attended 85.90% of the time within 15 days. Fine. Your target was 100%. Good target. But the reality is that with that target, you actually did achieve 100% in a timely manner. And I do wonder, for the sake of yourselves and for the sake of confidence, why not say that? You say it in the text. But if you were to put at the end of the red bit, you know, within 15 days, and at the bottom, 100% within a timely manner, that is a good confidence thing. But also, I did wonder, I noticed that you've got an increase in domestic fires and various other types of fires. And I wondered if there was any way of adjusting certain figures to account for the fact that there might have been an impact by other areas of the service. So if you're out doing extra fires, how can you be doing building regs? And I wondered if there was any way of showing this in an adjusted way to give a more balanced view of the targets, because at the moment it seems to be against yourselves. You got there 100% of the time in a timely fashion. Let people know that. So, you know, thanks, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. I can pick that up on Mark's behalf. The specific measure that you've picked there is actually a statutory target, so that 15 days is the statutory requirement. So, in effect, we are missing that on a number of occasions. On that particular measure, it was as a result of, in Q1 and Q2, not having enough staff trained due to people leaving the organisation. We have now rectified that in that particular area, so we will pick that up. We did miss it on a number of occasions. You're absolutely right, we did pick it up in a timely fashion, so we didn't not provide feedback from building regulations, but we did miss out on the 15-day guidance there. I think you're right, a passion of mine is target setting, and ultimately we need to have targets which drive behaviour fundamentally. You'll see another target in there where we aspire to target home fire safety checks to the most vulnerable people in the community on 90% of occasions. The reality is we would never turn a member of the public away from having a home fire safety check where we have capacity to do so. So the reality is that can skew our figures, because if someone who it turns out doesn't have a vulnerability but asks us for a home fire safety check, we'd absolutely go and deliver it. But it would then appear that we are not targeting our home fire safety checks very, very effectively. So we are looking at some of those. The reality is we need to make sure that whatever targets we're setting fall within a statistically significant band. So we have some areas where the figures are so low. Fire fatalities is a prime example, where if you get one more fire fatality and it throws the figures right the way out the window. And the reality is dwelling fires is another, mercifully low area for us within this county. So we're making sure that we are putting some of those targets within a statistically significant range. I think the reality is where we miss our targets, we would always interrogate why we missed them. So if that was as a result of being operationally busy in another area, then we'd absolutely pick that up. But the reality is I think we have capacity in some of those areas.
Thank you, Ryan. Well, it's Mike and then Karen.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 59, you mention again the terminology Sherman, which I didn't appreciate what it stood for. And I was wondering whether we could emphasise that sort of phraseology more, possibly in our county magazine, so people are aware of all those items that could help maybe stop having a fire or stop having a fatality. And further on in your report, petroleum licensing, I'm glad to see you've got 3 more officers now qualified that you can maybe catch up on those inspections. Thank you.
Just to come, yeah, so particularly in regards to the making more of the Sherman concept, so we do work closely with LCC Comms, and I know previously they've dedicated a page or so for us in regards to our fire prevention strategies that's gone out in the county news, but it's never a bad time to revisit that and to keep reminding people of the message and the risks in regards to fire prevention.
Thank you. Karen.
Thanks, Chair. And this is a genuine question. I don't know the answers anymore. First of all, you referred further back to the challenges in recruiting, and I wondered if those challenges impacted on the number of firefighters that you have going out on a vehicle each time, regardless of the gender. Does it have an impact on the numbers? And what is the number that go out on a vehicle these days? And is that a nationally or a county set figure? Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of points to that question. In regards to the recruitment, doesn't have a direct impact in regards to how many we put onto appliance. We'll put on the appliance the minimum amount of people, at least, that we need to for that appliance to be a competent crew. We have a minimum optimum ridership value of 4. 4 people are all relevantly trained in the roles that they're going to partake in that. So across the country, 4 is probably broadly accepted as the minimum. Aspirationally, we know 5 would be safer, but we know that we can safely deal with incidents with crews of 4. I think probably the more important figure that we focus on is actually the amount of people we get to the incident ground for certain types. So if, for example, we know that we need at least 9 people that can help safely resolve a house fire, as an example. Now, if that takes 2, 3 or 4 appliances to get 9 people there, then we will mobilise the right amount of resources to ensure that we've got the amount of people there. So, for example, if we're relatively confident that we know we'll always get a minimum of 4, then we will send 3 appliances to get there. We do have some incident types that we know that because they are very low risk, and I'll always use the example of, for example, a small bin fire in the middle of town, when we can mobilise with a crew of 3, and they're only going to be mobilised to do that specific role, and to ensure that we can at least stop that fire from getting any worse and creating any more damage.
Just wanted to come back if I could. Yeah, the reason I asked was, and I appreciate what you say about the lower level, if there is such a thing, but it was just because in the nastier, bigger fires, when people are using breathing equipment, obviously you're going to need, and I totally accept that you do it all safely. I'm not saying for a minute that you don't, but you'd think if you've got fewer people, then if you're using more at a fire, that's going to detract from somewhere else. So one way or another, it is going to impact, isn't it? But perhaps not directly, and with a huge impact.
Yeah, no, so, and again, just to give some confident assurance, as an incident either gets protracted or it is a large incident, then we will always mobilise the amount of appliances to get the people there as quick as we possibly can. We do regular modelling, which we call a scale and concurrency modelling, that bases on what is the amount of availability of appliances we need to manage with a large incident, 2 medium incidents and 4 small incidents all going on at the same time. So we'll always continually monitoring that we've got the right amount of appliances, which by virtue will ensure that we've got the right amount of people, and we continually review that to make sure that we're able to meet those risks.
One really cheeky last one. You know where you've got like injuries and fatalities and that? If firefighters were injured, would they be in those numbers?
We would report them separately.
Thank you. That's a really good question about numbers of people on fire appliances. I've never thought about it. It's a really important point, isn't it? Thank you. Right. Well, we'll move on then to libraries and heritage, pages 63 to 68. Any questions, please? Perhaps if I just ask one then, Will, if you could, within the bounds of what you're allowed to say, give us an update on the re-procurement of the library contract.
Yeah, absolutely. As you rightly say, there's not a huge amount I can outline at the moment, but what I'm pleased to be able to say is that the procurement exercise is progressing successfully, and it will be a competitive exercise, and the next stage will be reached in the next month or so. How quickly it goes from there will depend on the actual evaluation of the tenders that we're due to receive over that time, but the main point at the moment is that we've been very pleased with the initial tenders that we've received.
Great, thank you. Karen? Well, this is your chance to get
you
in
knew
about...
I'd have to speak, didn't you? At Ermac, we've had loads of UK SPF money, and we've actually had some money recently for doing a bit of gardening outside, basically. And there was a bit of a glitch because it turned out the bit we were going to use wasn't actually in the tenancy agreement. And the officers here were wonderful. They really helped me move it. So thank you ever so much for that.
No worries, thank you.
So the Ermine Library's been mentioned twice now today, so I'll mention Heckington Windmill again just to make absolutely sure we're equal. Any more? Great, we'll move on to road safety then, pages 68 to 7. Any questions? Stephen's here, I think. Oh, who's here? Right. Right. Oh yes, there's Stephen. Sorry, you're looking straight at me. Any questions for Stephen on road safety? He's been sat here. Mike, did you put your hand up?
Well, actually, Chairman, you went a bit faster for me. I was on about, if I've got it right, on the road safety, as it were, having had a personal experience of an accident, and we've had a number of conversations regarding signage and increased awareness with smaller signs that go up. Do you get direct contact from any of the members of the public, or is it only through councillors?
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to signing specifically, or in terms of general concern? General concern. Yeah, so we're contacted by a number of different routes, but I would say sort of 10, 20 plus a day from members of the public directly. Whenever we take any action or do any investigation, we'll always ensure that we then let the local member know so that they have all the information that we have, and of course liaise on any decision making that might occur in those local areas too.
Stephen, could I just ask you about children killed or seriously injured? I mean, it's 5 on this report, but 1's too many, obviously. What age does that include on that measure? Up to what age?
Yeah, it's 0 to 15 in that measure that we've been looking at on there, I believe.
Thank you. Karen?
Thanks, Chair. Just because this is the last meeting and I might not come out the other side either, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Stephen Batchelor because he's helped me quite a lot. On the Ermine, you'd think to listen to some residents it was like Le Mans, but it really isn't. But he's helped me. It's about reassuring those residents, not just, we've done the monitoring and we've said, look, this is what's happening, but we've given the reassurance because they do worry about it. You've only got to see one sort of close thing and you think it's really happening all the time, but over a period of 4 years, you've really helped. Thank you ever so much. Thanks.
I know certainly my experience, going on from what Karen says, is that when someone's sitting in their house or their home and watching this, seeing the cars go past, they can get the fear that they're going a lot faster than what they actually are. And I know in the residential areas where you've done speed checks for me, the average speed has often surprised everybody that it's a lot lower than what people think it is. So it is that reassurance often that's needed, isn't it?
Thank you, Councillors. Yeah, and I think that's where the difficulty, I think we've talked about in this forum before, when we're trying to make difficult decisions about where those resources and what actions should be taken. And so it's really important that we do that from a basis of robust data. But again, as I say, I do believe that perception of the local community is no less valid, regardless of what the data shows. It's just what level of intervention is necessary. And as Councillor Clark highlighted, sometimes it can just be information science to show that we're listening, to show that there is a repeater, a reminder of the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, which tends to be the limit where vulnerable road users need to be protected.
I know you've been very helpful for anything that I've needed too, and I'm sure we'd all agree with that. So no more questions on that. We'll move on to volunteering then, pages 71 to 72. Any questions? Mike?
Thank you, Chairman. It's not actually a question. It's more of a comment and a thank you, really. We don't always appreciate the number of volunteers that we have working in cooperation with us, or the number of hours that they put in. And I think it's absolutely amazing, and they should all be, if I could possibly thank them personally, I would do. But it's amazing what work they do.
Lee, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so I'm happy to feed that back to the VCS. The work they've done certainly over the last year has seen quite a significant increase in volunteering numbers. The new website has had around about 1,500 people, I think, sign up to it. And I think it's had in the region of 150,000 visits to the site. So clearly there's a large interest in volunteering that goes quite evenly across all of the Lincolnshire area. But the impact of it is quite tremendous. And I'm sure through the annual report that we bring next year, we'll be able to evidence in more detail the types of things that are happening, the types of organisations that are being engaged with, and the value of the work that you've highlighted.
Thank you, Lee. If I could just ask you on the Lincolnshire Funding Alliance, which is on page 71 that you mentioned, could you just tell us what sort of came out of that? Were there any key points that you could sort of report back from that?
So in terms of the Funding Alliance, that's all around how they support the voluntary sector to access different funds and the kind of methodologies that are used for it. So that contains both funding advice, but also the kind of readiness and skills required to be able to fill in the applications and the forms. During the year, there was 279 different organisations that were supported through the funding application process, which obviously generates the value that's shown within the report. So the activity that we're contributing to is bringing more money into Lincolnshire that's then spent directly in local communities to support those initiatives. But that alliance covers all sorts of different groups and organisations of different sizes. So it goes from community garden type activities through to village halls, youth clubs, etc., that are all seeking to attract funding to deliver what they want to achieve.
If I could just, while I've got you, Lee, because this is my last chance, I've been a trustee on quite a few things and a volunteer, and I'm an area regional chairman for something at the moment, and I've noticed that with a lot of voluntary groups, one of the big problems they've got at the minute is attracting people to be on their committee, and they're frightened about the responsibilities of being on a committee. They're quite happy to help, but they don't want to go that extra step. And I've had in the world I have 42 clubs that I sort of look after in one particular area, and 3 have closed because they can't get a committee. So I was wondering if some sort of emphasis could be given to that, because it is 2 of the clubs that closed had 40 or 50 members. It wasn't because they hadn't got the people there, it's just that they didn't have the people to step up. And it's that next step that I think they need, people need supporting.
Yeah, so that's something that's been a theme for the last 2 or 3 years. There are more opportunities than volunteers coming through the system. So whilst people are taking up a number of volunteering opportunities, there's always a surplus at the end of the day on that. They are typically the trustee type positions that are difficult to fill because of the additional time requirements. Again, VCS and LCVS provide training and advice on that to support people into those posts, but they're harder to recruit too. It tends to require somebody with a specific interest or ambition to move into those posts. A lot of people are quite happy with giving something back, and when we look at the kind of analysis of what people are volunteering for, it's you know, it's around mental health, it's around befriending, it's around you know, being involved in their community, rather than necessarily the kind of physical operation of the entity, which is where the gaps tend to end up.
Thank you. Any more questions? Good. Well, I think, bear with me, that concludes the discussion of that item, and I propose that the committee accepts the report and records its satisfaction with the Public Protection and Community Service level performance for Q3 of 24-25. And obviously our opinions and comments have been captured. Can you please raise your hand if you agree with that? Yes, that's unanimous. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 8, Trading Standards Response to Illicit Tobacco and Illegal Vapes, on pages 75 to 92 of the agenda pack, providing a review of the enforcement activities undertaken by the Trading Standards Service targeting the sales of illicit tobacco and illegal vapes for January to December 2024. The actions required by us are to review and comment on the report and the enforcement activities undertaken by Trading Standards in 2024 to tackle the sales of those things. It's going to be presented by Mark Keel, Head of Trading Standards. We also have Andy... Oh, no, we don't have Andy Wright. He's not here. We've got other people here as well. So anyway, Mark, over to you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Andy's been called to court this morning to assist with an application that police colleagues are making. He provided a witness statement and he's been asked to attend in person, so he's had to skip out. So unfortunately, Andy is our lead officer in this area. Also present today are Kim and Neil, who both work in his team. And really, without the work of Andy and his team, there wouldn't be much to put into this report. So I'm really grateful for the work that they undertake. In terms of the report itself, it's the first time we've brought this as a paper to the Scrutiny Committee. So if you just indulge me, I've covered quite a bit of the background around illicit tobacco and the legislation that we enforce, as well as the work that we've undertaken through the year. And I'm quite happy to take questions on any of that. And again, I'd like to thank Andy for his contribution to that while I drafted up the report itself. He went through it, red-penned it, and made sure that it was accurate as far as possible. So again, thanks to Andy for that. But yeah, moving forward, quite happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mark, and welcome to Kimberley and to Neil. Nice to see you've been sitting patiently there. Can I just ask you about the closure orders from going up from 23 to 68, a huge increase. Is that because there's more illicit activity going on, or is it because we're tracking them down better?
Partially, this is due to more enforcement action. As we've already heard mention about plotting this morning, and Andy and the team are working very closely with police in Boston and Spalding. The retail outlets for illicit tobacco are in the areas of particularly high crime and antisocial behaviour, and part of our response or our contribution to what plotting is to undertake enforcement in those premises with the police. We probably do 80% of the work in that area, so we do the closure application bundles. Our legal services take through about 80% of those. Police solicitors take through another 20%, and we take all of the investigation work off the back of that as well. So we're contributing quite a lot to what plotting in those areas, and because of the success that has garnered in Boston and Spalding, we've had lots of requests from policing teams in other locations, so particularly Grantham, Skegness, Louth. We've done some activity there, and we're also receiving some funding this year from the PCC through the Safer Streets funding to undertake similar activity in and around Lincoln High Street and Portland Street. So there's reasons why, but actually it's quite an effective tool for disrupting the activity.
these closure orders are only for 3 months, aren't they? Which always seems a bit of a shame to me. What happens after 3 months? Do they just open again or go somewhere else? Or what are you finding?
A bit of both. They do open up again, or we have found people skipping into another vacant premise. But we routinely follow up after a closure order has been expended. So we do undertake further test purchase or inspection work. And if we find problems, then we put it straight back into court to extend that. And there are a number of premises that have been closed 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times.
We've seen the shops with the notices on and we've seen pictures of them. How do you make sure that nobody goes back in them after you've shut them?
Again, that's working with our police colleagues. It's all signposted up. And if there are reports, the police have been really good at sending people out to pick up people who are in the premise. Certainly as a service, we've prosecuted for a couple of incidents that occurred in Boston, and there was one towards the back end of last year where police attended and there are half a dozen people in one of the premises, and they were all arrested, and action was taken by the police on that occasion. So we're pretty confident that we're keeping people out.
Boston is the top place for this. So we've got 2 Boston councillors here. Anton, I think, wants to come in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only thing, because I was looking at the tables at page 81 and I think 82, and I mean, it's very interesting to see that people are selling illegal cigarettes in car boot sales, at barber shops, phone shops. So, I mean, I do recognize that the prices of a pack of cigarettes is almost £20 these days. I'm not sure, I never smoked in my life. So it's very expensive. So this pandemic is just going to increase and keep going. The only thing I didn't see here is that I'm pretty sure that there is people who sell cigarettes from their homes. I didn't see any numbers here.
Yeah, we don't get so much intelligence around people that sell from home, but people do. We have prosecuted in the past people who've sold from premises. It's a little more tricky for us to investigate those. There are lots of rules and regulations around directed surveillance and the use of sources to make test purchases in those circumstances. But if we get a sufficient evidence to suggest that it's occurring, then we can take action on those. But we don't get very many complaints in that area.
And Paul, the other Boston councillor. Yes, of course.
Thank you. Once I met with one of our local shops, which is closed because they sell illegal cigarettes, and it's not an advice. I told him that you shouldn't do that. It's illegal because they sell to kids in schools. But the shop was closed. And his reply, he told me, you know what? Whatever I will pay, I will come back and sell because there is good money in it. And I was shocked to hear that. So they don't even care about the fines they get, and they keep going on. That's just a point.
Yeah, and I can fully understand that mentality. As it says in the report, illicit tobacco retails for between £3 and £7 a pack, depending on the type of tobacco that it is. And the average price, if you go into Tesco's, is around £15. So there's definitely a market there for it. And whilst that market exists, I'm sure there'll be people willing to sell.
Paul?
Indeed, market supply and demand again, isn't it? Which is a big thing to fight. What I was going to ask about was actually the landlords, because people see all these shops, and a lot of the ownership of a lot of the shops is still in the hands of the people that used to trade from them. Do you get, first question is, do you get some collaboration regarding enforcement with these people?
Yeah, we routinely, if we find illicit tobacco in a premise, then we are in touch with the landlord. To be honest, the use of closure orders has strengthened our hand in that respect. We've amended some of the standard letters that we send out now to include reference to the fact that this has actually been tested by a court already. that seems to have worked. We have a reasonable success with getting landlords to remove problem tenants, and we do work with those that are willing to assist in that regard. So Andy has provided witness statements. He's attended county court previously to give evidence as part of eviction hearings. But we are finding that that landlords are willing to move people on. We still find the occasional one that are a bit more intransient, but ultimately we can look at more formal investigation, particularly through money laundering offences. Once they're made aware that there's illegal activity going on in the premise, then rental payments are obviously tainted by that illegal activity. So they could be committing money laundering offences. So ultimately, that is the line we would go down with.
Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine's more an observation as opposed to a question. I was very pleased with the work that you have done, and obviously the publicity that you've got in the paper and on the TV was excellent. And I do like the big notices that the police put on the shop windows. There's not just one obscure one. There's a multitude, which obviously then makes the public well aware that action is being taken against these illegal sales. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I've got Liz to bring in a minute. I've just asked the question I had about the accredited financial investigator. At the moment, we don't have one, but it's we sub it out to Derby City Council. Looking at the figures here, do you think it is a thing that we should have ourselves? Because obviously then we'd keep more of the money, wouldn't we? Sorry, Mark, perhaps you ought to explain what it is first.
Right, so an accredited financial investigator is somebody who's qualified to undertake financial investigations. So they can make applications to court to get certain information out of financial establishments. They can apply for restraint. So if we can identify assets, they can restrain those so that they are there and available in the event of a prosecution. Ultimately, they can apply for a confiscation order to recover the proceeds of crime. In terms of our use of Derby City, that's been in place for about 2 years now. I would very much like to have a financial investigator in-house because it would allow us to dig a little bit deeper. When you're paying somebody else to do that particular work, you can go so far, but it's how far you invest into that investigation ultimately. So having somebody in-house would allow us to perhaps dig a little deeper. What I can say from the financial investigations is that I've seen quite considerable sums of money moving through accounts. And if we're lucky enough one day to find one of those accounts with that sum in, then we can get that restrained, and that then becomes available for confiscation in the event of a successful prosecution. So they can pay for themselves in terms of the money that's recovered, but we can also outsource work to other authorities as well. There's only so many financial investigators that are available to people, so there's usually work external to them. So we are looking at that in reasonable seriousness to see if that's viable.
Thank you, Mark. Liz.
Thank you. I'm from Spalding, and I know we recently had the biggest ever haul there. There was a very excited policeman picture in the paper revealing a mountain of this stuff. So we've been talking about this so often since I've been on this committee. We've shut people down, they've opened up. What can we do to somehow cut it off at the root rather than just cut off the leaves and the ends of the branches? I think 3 months is nothing like long enough. Surely, who would you have to go to? Would it have to be done legally? It would have to be done legally, but to make it 6 months, because 3 months is so short. Thank you.
I think it would take a change in the law to extend that period, so it would be lobbying government to make those changes.
Yeah, but you know, it's a lot of time and money is being spent in doing this for a short time, and then they're opened up again. This happens in Spalding all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is frustrating for
Yes,
us, but
it
we
must
used
be.
to see with prosecution as well. You know, it can take a while to do a prosecution, but the day after you've done the raid, then somebody would be back in selling again. At least this way we are disrupting that flow
Good.
to an extent. So from our perspective, you know, if you sort of add those 3 months up, that starts to come into years worth of time that premises aren't being able to
Is
train.
there a limit to how many times you can shut them
No.
down for 3 months? So you can do it
We can
regularly?
keep going and keep
Forever.
going and keep going. I think ultimately it's capacity that becomes the barrier to doing more.
Okay, thank you.
Anton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It just, you know, talking about this subject, I think we have to go to the reality of the subject. I think I will hold the government probably more responsible of how these things get to the country at first, because I mean, Mark, what you're doing, I think, is incredible. I do sympathize with you, because looking at the figures on page 85, some of the things have tripled. It's not just, you know, doubled, it has tripled. So, as I say, the pandemic is there. All what we can do is probably tackle it. The 3 months, I don't see it fit. However, again, if you look at our town centers, they are deteriorating. A lot of shops are empty. The price to rent a shop probably less than £1,000. You go and open a shop and probably you apply for a license to sell vegetables, you end up selling vapes, and it's, you know, it's my debate all the time, and I think the government has to stand and change the legislations and help the local councils to do proper work. You can fight it as much as you can. As I say, the price, if it gets to £15, people, they will go for £5, £3. We have an inflation in this country. We have poverty in this country. People, you know, are suffering. So where will you, you know, if you're an addicted smoker, where will you go? Will you go and buy for £15? You will go for £3. And these things will be, you know, happening all the time. Unless the government come and put something which is concrete and stop people doing that. The other thing I want to touch on, there's a lot of gangs, they work all together as a group. So once you ban one and you probably prosecute them, whatever, they bring their cousin or they bring somebody else to open another shop. And it keeps going. It's just, you know, a roller coaster happening. And I think, like I say, Mark, I mean, I give you credit for what you're doing. And we can see the figures are up. But that's our reality, I think, probably in Lincolnshire, probably in England, in whole. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Shall we, Martin, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think if you do look at do the maths of the 68 closure orders, 3 months, 204 months, 17 years, you know, if you do it by month, so it's a big impact. But you know, Mark and the team, the activity they're doing is we want to make Lincolnshire a no-go area for the illicit sales of tobacco, vapes, and alcohol. And by targeting the addresses, you're absolutely right, Councillor. It's organised criminality. These shops are you know, people who are, the way they set them up is organised, the way they run them is organised, the way they distribute and get rid of the money is organised. You know, so all of those challenges are both there for law enforcement and us as trading standards. But we certainly want to continue to push the message that you will be targeted, you will be identified, we will be coming, we will be visiting, you know, and we will be closing you down. And then subsequent prosecutions that fall out of that as well to kind of give us that time, because we do know that certainly from feedback from the residents of Boston, where a lot of the activity has been taking place, but other places, that this trading standards and police and other agencies working together significantly improves people's confidence of being able to go around those areas where those shops are. You know, we see a reduction in antisocial behaviour, we see a reduction in criminal behaviour by the activity that trading standards and others have done, so we will continue to do it. Unfortunately, you're right, until legislations change, until culture change, we will have to continue to fight the fight.
Did you want to come back, Mark, or have we said everything?
Only in terms of this is an organised crime. You know, we're fully aware of that. You know, we see incidents where, you know, we currently have a case that's awaiting sentencing. But the chap in question, he's been prosecuted in at least 3-4 other authorities around the country. And when you start looking at things like Companies House, you're doing director searches under those names, you see that these people are directors of companies that are obviously just little shops that have been set up, and they might be in 9 or 10 different locations. So, you know, these people are, whether they're just stooges that are being paid to take up the directorship and the hit, isn't clear to us. But we certainly suspect that's what's happening. People are being exploited on the promise of payment, and any fine or anything that drops out of that being picked up as well. So it's a proper organised crime that we're looking at.
Briefly, Mike, if you would, please.
Yes, we're all obviously concerned that, as it were, the penalty doesn't fit the crime, and you said about a change of legislation, and I wonder if it's something that the council in future could consider, and maybe it writes collectively to our MPs, and we push that this type of crime needs a greater penalty in order to deter a few people. Thank you.
Karen.
I totally agree, but there's no room in the prison, so...
We're all agreed, or we can all agree, that we think 3 months for a closure order isn't long enough. We all know that it's not within our power to change it, but it is something that can be recorded from this committee. And if I can just bring it to a close there, I think, Mark, I'd just like to thank you and your team for coming to us very regularly. In fact, more regularly than you used to do. When you just did an annual report that covered everything, it was a nightmare. There was so much. So breaking it down into these individual areas, I think, has certainly worked in terms of scrutinising it. And obviously, we can't tie the hands of future committees, but I think I would definitely recommend you stick to the way that you're doing it, because it gives us more opportunity to ask detailed questions on each area, because trading standards, I think, is such an important part of what this council does, and people don't even realise sometimes it is part of the council. Could I just ask you, Mark, finally, to just so that it's on the record, if people have a concern about any of these things, they want to report it, who do they report it to?
There's various ways to report. They can report it to Crime Stoppers. They can report it to trading standards via the Citizens Advice Consumer Service. Just need to make a phone call. That can be anonymous. You can do it online. Again, it can be provided anonymously. But just give us the information. You can report it to the police. The police will refer that information over to us as part of the information sharing agreement that we've got. So there's multiple ways of getting that complaint and that intelligence to us.
Thank you very much, Mark. Well, that concludes the discussion of this item, and I propose that the committee has reviewed the report and endorses the enforcement activities undertaken by Trading Standards in 2024 to tackle sales of illicit tobacco and illegal vapes, and that we receive a further update in May 2026. And we've obviously recorded the other comments that have been made. Please, could you raise your hand if you agree with that? Yes, that's unanimous. I don't think we need to say any more about that. So thank you again, all of you, for coming. Thank you both. So item 9, Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee Work Programme for the next committee. So pages 93 to 102 sets out the work programme for 25-26, and Tracy Johnson, our Senior Scrutiny Officer, is going to present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. So the work programme sets out the planned items for the new County Council term during the first year from June 2025 to May 2026. And as always with the work programme, it is a living document and is subject to further change. The relevant chief officers and assistant directors have been consulted with regarding the proposed work programme items to help identify the key items for scrutiny by the committee. As you can see in the agenda pack, the 8 meetings in 25-26 are already fairly full, and this is before we add on any pre-decision scrutiny items, any requests from the new committee members, or any items that need to be considered that arise during the year. The next committee's meeting is on the 17th of June, so as usual for the first meeting in the new council term, we'll be having introductory presentations for the different service areas, for public protection, culture, corporate and fire and rescue. And also we're having a couple of the reports, the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership Annual Report, that should have been due today's meeting, and needs to be deferred due to the timescales. And he'll also be sitting as the Crime Disorder Scrutiny Committee to consider the Sophia Lincolnshire Partnership Strategy for 2025-2028. And just going on to the trading standards reports, they are listed for the 4 different areas throughout the year. So in the July meeting, there will be the food standards, food safety report. So they are spread throughout the year. So that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tracy. There was just the point of the cadet programme update, wasn't there, that Mike mentioned that would be included in one of the fire service reports next year. Anybody else want to say anything? Well, that concludes that discussion, and I propose that we endorse the planned work programme for 25-26. Could you please raise your hand if you agree? That's unanimous. Thank you. And once again, thank you all very much. I shall miss chairing this meeting, and I wish you all well, the officers ongoing, and for my fellow councillors. And I know you're not all here today, but whichever party, political group you belong to, I think we can all agree that we work together really well on here. So thank you all very much, and goodbye. Thank you.